All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is the 7 levels of manifestation. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, where everyone starts, the complexity trap, coming back around, the review, and then your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, if you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. If you want this training along with its respective document, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on how to improve in every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the newsletter, again, from the link in the description. With that said, let's get started and talk about where everyone starts. So there's a pattern in any field you can think of, and it's honestly one of the most interesting patterns if you really pay attention to it, is that the people at the very beginning and the people at the very end of understanding in any field arrive at the exact same conclusion a lot of the times, although through very different means, right? Now, this pattern also appears when it comes to manifestation, and you've probably seen this meme of the bell curve, how the person on the left and the person on the right have come to the same conclusion, although through very different means, and as the person in the middle that really is overcomplicating everything. Now, the people at the very beginning of the journey and at the end of the journey in manifestation as well come to this exact same conclusion. They just decide what they want, they take action, they expect to receive it, and they move on with their day. Everything in between, all the technique and method and complexity, that's where most people get permanently stuck and never leave. So I want to start at the bottom of the curve with what manifestation looks like before you even know it has a name. And then we're going to move up level by level until the end. So level 1 is something you've probably already experienced at some point in your life, maybe as a kid or maybe even recently, where you just wanted something, you fully expected it to happen, and then it did, and you didn't think twice about why or how any of it worked, right? It's almost as if you're ordering a meal at a restaurant. There was no method involved at this stage. There was no journaling protocol, no 21-day challenge, no vibrational alignment routine. It was just a plain and ordinary assumption that the thing you wanted was on its way to you. And that assumption felt so completely normal and unremarkable that you didn't even notice you were doing anything worth paying attention to. Some people just call it confidence, right? Quiet confidence. And the funny part is, you didn't register it as manifestation at all. You just lived your life and things tended to line up when you genuinely expected them to, mostly because you expected them to, which, when you actually think about it, is really the purest and most effective form of the whole process working exactly how it's supposed to work. There was zero resistance in the way, and that total absence of resistance is actually the key ingredient that makes level 1 so accidentally powerful, even though the person at this level has absolutely no clue why it works, or that they're doing something that entire communities spend years trying to reverse engineer. And the funny thing here is that at the very thing that made it work so well, the fact that you weren't thinking about it or managing it or monitoring it, is exactly the thing you lose the moment you try to turn it into a conscious practice with steps and structure. The other piece of level 1 that makes it quietly powerful, and this part becomes the rarest quality in the world the deeper you go into the later levels, is just the total and complete absence of doubt about the outcome. There was also a complete detachment about the outcome. You just wanted something, you took action, expected it to come if you take action, and that was it. And it came, right? You weren't monitoring your thoughts at this level. You weren't checking for signs or angel numbers. You weren't worrying about whether you were doing it right. You weren't checking whether you got it every single day because you're so attached to it to make sure that you're doing it right. And that lack of self-consciousness and detachment is exactly what really allowed the whole thing to move so smoothly without you getting in your own way. And there's this kind of chill vibe that basically comes with not knowing there's supposed to be a process or a right way to do it. And that chill vibe is essentially the exact same state that people at level 7 spend years trying to get back to after going through the entire curve from start to finish. And building on that, level 1 has this quality of relaxation that you just can't fake and you can't manufacture through technique, which is the relaxation that comes from genuinely not knowing there's anything to be stressed about in the first place. The trust at this level isn't earned or built through evidence or affirmations repeated 1,000 times. It's just the default setting you start with before anyone or anything teaches you some methods, and those methods making you doubt yourself. And that default trust turns out to be the single most valuable thing you had all along, even though you never knew it. And this is the thing that trips most people up later on, I think, is the realization that trust was their starting position, and they spent years trying to rebuild something they only lost because they went looking for a more sophisticated version of it. That original trust, the level 1 version of it, is actually the gold standard that every technique in the manifestation world is secretly trying to recreate, and most of them can't, because the act of deliberately trying to recreate it introduces the exact kind of effort and resistance and self-awareness that makes it impossible, and self-consciousness. The whole thing at level 1 just moved without any friction at all, because you had no concept that friction was even possible in this area of your life. And that ends up being maybe the most ironic part of the entire manifestation journey once you see the full picture. Things just showed up and you didn't question the timing or the method of delivery or whether you deserved it or any of that. You just received it the way a kid receives a birthday gift, with zero analysis and zero conditions and zero second guessing. And what's really going on at level 1, though you won't understand this until much later in the journey, is that the absence of technique is itself the technique. And the absence of effort is itself the most powerful form of alignment you'll ever experience. So keep this level in mind as we move forward through the curve, because everything that follows, all the complexity and method and confusion, is ultimately just a very long loop that brings you right back here to the same quiet, unforced, expectant place. Now, level 2 is where things start to change a little bit, where you begin connecting the dots between your inner world and your outer world. And you realize that the things showing up in your life seem weirdly and consistently correlated with what you've been thinking about or expecting lately. You notice that when you felt genuinely good about something or genuinely expected it, the thing tended to show up faster or more smoothly. And when you were stressed or heavy with doubt about it because of all the complexity around it, things either stalled completely or went in a direction you didn't want. This is the first moment of conscious awareness around the whole process. And it feels exciting and a little electric. I was there too, so I understand completely. Like you basically stumbled onto something real and significant and secret even, that most people around you either don't know about or actively dismiss. And naturally, that awareness leads to curiosity about why it works and how you can do it more deliberately, which leads to research, which leads you straight into the next level of the curve, where things start getting more complicated than you'd expect. So you might get a few more hits around this time too, things that you were thinking about that showed up almost too perfectly to be random and to be a coincidence. And these confirmations feel like solid evidence that you're genuinely onto something real and worth pursuing deeper. The early wins at level 2 basically create this kind of momentum that feels amazing. And it's that momentum that pushes you forward, that makes you want to learn more about why this works and how to do it on purpose rather than just hoping it keeps happening by accident. Now, that momentum then turns into a real hunger for understanding and more knowledge, a hunger for the system behind the results. And that hunger is exactly what pulls you out of the natural simplicity of these early levels and into the dense and crowded middle of the curve, where most people end up spending the rest of their time. And so what happens next is honestly pretty predictable, right? Once you see the pattern play out, you've had genuine results, you've noticed the connection between your expectations and your reality, and now you want the method, you want the framework, you want to understand the exact mechanics so you can make this work on command. So you start looking for teachers, for systems, for clear explanations of the process, and the manifestation space has absolutely no shortage of those, which is fine, right? It's amazing, really. Which means you're about to walk into a whole world, though, of competing methods and frameworks that all claim to be the real answer if you just follow them correctly. And they might be. But at the end of the day, they all lead to the same conclusion. There's Neville Goddard, there's Abraham Hicks, there's Joe Dispenza, scripting community, subliminal audio channels, quantum physics explanations, and dozens of other entry points into this world. And each one arrives with its own vocabulary, its own rules, and its own specific set of claims about what you need to do. And you absorb all of it because you're genuinely hungry for knowledge. And that's amazing, by the way. And you want to be thorough about this, which is also amazing. And that absorption feels productive and exciting, but it's also the very beginning of a long detour that most people don't realize they're taking until they're already deep in it. So the shift from level 2 to level 3 is subtle on the surface, but massive underneath everything. You go from someone who notices manifestation happening naturally in their life to someone who is actively trying to make manifestation happen through specific and deliberate effort. Now, the word trying is the whole key here. At levels 1 and 2, you weren't trying anything at all, right? You were just being, you were just living, you were just expecting. And the moment trying enters the picture, effort, this death grip on the results, on this attachment, this tetheredness around the outcome, a certain ease quietly leaves that moment. And that ease was really the thing doing most of the heavy lifting the entire time without you really realizing it. And this is the real departure from the simplicity that actually produced the results. And everything that follows from here is really a journey through increasing layers of complexity that will eventually, if you're one of the very few who make it all the way through, bring you right back to this same simple and quiet place you just left. And the deep irony of it, the thing you won't see clearly until you're on the other side of the curve looking back, is that you're about to spend a huge amount of time and energy learning how to do something you were already doing perfectly well without any instructions at all. So let's talk about the complexity trap. Now, levels 3 through 5 are where the majority of people in the manifestation space live permanently. This is the flat middle of the bell curve. They basically found the techniques. This is the fat middle of the bell curve, not flat. They found the techniques, they learned the vocabulary, they built entire daily routines around doing everything correctly. And somewhere along the way, the simplicity that actually made things work got completely buried under layer after layer of method. And this is where good intentions meet overthinking. And the result is a kind of spiritual busy work that feels like real progress and sophistication, but rarely delivers anything close to what early levels produced naturally and without any effort at all. Level 3 is the full research phase, where you dive deep into the content and start consuming everything you can find about how manifestation works, from long YouTube breakdowns to classic books to paid courses to entire online communities full of people sharing their specific techniques and tracking their results. And maybe you've even been on Reddit and so on. You discover scripting, visualization, SATS, meaning state akin to sleep, the 369 method, daily affirmations, subliminal audio tracks, vision boards, and probably a dozen other specific practices that all promise to be the real key to getting what you want consistently and on demand whenever you want it. The sheer volume of techniques available creates a kind of overwhelm that actually feels productive because you're learning and expanding your understanding. Again, great, amazing. But in reality, you're mostly just accumulating options without ever fully committing to understanding the single principle beneath all of them that does the actual work. So you start comparing methods against each other, trying to figure out which one is the best, which one produces the fastest results, which one the most successful practitioners use. And that comparison game can genuinely go on for months or even years without you even realizing it's become a massive distraction from the one thing you actually are supposed to be doing. And at some point, the collecting of techniques becomes the main activity itself, right? Where you're spending far more time studying manifestation and refining your approach than you're simply living in the assumption that what you want is already on its way, which is the one single move that really every technique in existence is ultimately trying to get you to, right? You build a structured daily practice around these methods. Maybe you script first thing in the morning. Maybe you run affirmations throughout the day. You do a full visualization session before bed. And the structure of it all feels disciplined and serious, like you're finally giving this the kind of attention and commitment it really deserves. So the routine itself becomes a source of comfort and even an identity over time. And you start to feel like the routine is what's producing the results, which creates a real and growing dependency on the specific method rather than on the underlying state that the method was only ever meant to help you access temporarily. And over time, the routine gets rigid and brittle to the point where missing a single day or doing a technique slightly wrong, quote unquote, makes you feel like you've disrupted the whole manifestation, which is essentially the exact opposite of the relaxed and natural expectation that made level 1 and level 2 work so smoothly and so easily. Now, level 4 is where the method takes over your life completely. And this is the level where the most people get truly and deeply stuck, sometimes for years at a stretch, because the complexity itself feels like sophistication and the daily effort feels like genuine and admirable dedication to the quote unquote craft. So you become completely focused on doing each technique perfectly, on getting the visualization exactly right in every detail, on feeling the precise emotion at the precise intensity for the precise amount of time, and any deviation from that perfect execution starts to feel like a critical failure that could ruin the entire thing you're building. I'm sure you felt like this before. So you start monitoring your own thoughts throughout the day. You start catching the negative ones and trying to replace them with positive ones as fast as humanly possible, which creates a kind of exhausting mental surveillance system that actually generates far more tension and anxiety than it ever manages to resolve or dissolve. So the whole process at this level becomes about total control of your inner experience, controlling your thoughts, controlling your emotions, controlling your so-called vibration, all this tension, right? And that desperate and constant need for control is fundamentally incompatible with the trust and the ease that made the early levels work and that the final levels return to deliberately. So you also start looking for confirmations and signs everywhere at this level. Angel numbers on your phone, synchronicities with strangers, specific songs playing at the exact right moment. And every single little coincidence becomes evidence in your mind that the manifestation is either on its way or being blocked, depending on how the sign makes you feel in that moment. So this constant sign seeking creates a heavy dependency on external validation for something that is fundamentally and entirely supposed to be an internal process. And it puts you in a permanent state of watching and waiting and interpreting rather than just knowing and living and letting things arrive when they arrive while you keep taking action. The problem with building your entire confidence on external signs is that when the signs stop showing up for a while, and they always do at some point, your whole belief system starts to wobble and shake, which sends you right back into more technique and more effort and more complexity to try to fix whatever you think went wrong this time. And the growing anxiety you feel at this level is really honestly the biggest and clearest signal that the entire approach has gone off track somewhere fundamental. Right? Because the whole point of manifestation was supposed to be that you feel settled, you feel certain and at peace. And instead, what's happening now is you feel anxious and unsure and doubtful and tense and constantly checking your phone for angel numbers, right? And here's the part that nobody in the manifestation space really wants to talk about openly or honestly. Despite all this technique and all this daily dedication and all this accumulated knowledge, the actual tangible results at level 4 tend to plateau or even decline compared to what you were getting back in the earlier and simpler stages when you weren't trying anywhere near this hard. The daily practice that once felt exciting and full of possibility now feels more like an obligation that you just can't skip without guilt. And you start wondering quietly whether you're just not cut out for this, whatever this is, right? Whether maybe you're the exception to the rule, whether maybe this whole thing works for other people but not for you. And that doubt and that exhaustion are actually healthy signals. Even though they genuinely don't feel that way in the moment, they are. Your deeper intelligence is trying to tell you that the whole approach has gone sideways somewhere and that something fundamental about the way you're doing this needs to change before anything real and lasting can actually shift. Now, level 5 is the absolute peak of the bell curve. Maximum complexity, maximum effort, minimum consistent results. And paradoxically, is probably the most important level in the entire framework because this is the exact point where the real turning point either happens or it doesn't. So you're mentally and emotionally spent from years of constant self-monitoring, technique maintenance, sign watching, journaling, visualization sessions, and the growing gap between the amount of effort you're putting in every single day and the results you're actually seeing has become too big and too obvious to keep rationalizing away. And at some point, if you're truly and unflinchingly honest with yourself about what's going on, you have to sit with the really uncomfortable admission that the version of you at level 1 and 2, the one who just expected things and let them come without overthinking any of it, was actually getting better and more consistent results than you are right now with all of your advanced understanding and elaborate daily rituals. And that admission is genuinely hard to sit with sometimes if you've spent a lot of time into this. It means all the learning, all the accumulated complexity, all those years of effort and dedication might have been a very long and roundabout detour rather than the forward path you believed it was the entire time. And accepting that takes a kind of raw honesty that most people in this whole space never quite arrive at, right? They don't want to. They cling to this. And so you start questioning the teachers and the methods and the communities you've been part of, and eventually you start questioning the one core assumption that holds the entire middle of the bell curve together, which is the assumption that more technique and more knowledge and more daily effort automatically equals better and more reliable results. It doesn't, right? This questioning phase feels like a real disillusionment at first, and it can be genuinely painful and disorienting, especially if you've built a part of your social identity and your daily routine, and maybe even your friendships around being someone who takes manifestation seriously and does the work. But right underneath the disillusionment, there's a new kind of openness that wasn't available to you at any of the previous levels. A real and honest willingness to consider that maybe the answer has always been much simpler than you were making it, maybe radically and almost embarrassingly simpler. And that openness is the narrow doorway to what comes next on the other side of the curve. Now, that isn't to say that you accumulating the knowledge, by the way, was for nothing. I'm not saying that. You just don't want to get stuck there and keep looking for the next technique and the next strategy, right? The actual turning point of level 5 happens when you stop adding more layers and start subtracting them instead. When you genuinely begin to wonder, what would happen if you just stopped doing all the techniques and the daily rituals and went back to something far more basic and far more direct? There's a moment, and it honestly looks very different for every single person who gets here, where you just get tired enough of the whole complex production that you let go of the need to control every piece of the process. And in that letting go, something genuinely and noticeably changes in a way that all the methods and techniques and visualization sessions never quite managed to produce. The relief that follows is the immediate and almost physical kind of sensation, like you've been carrying something genuinely heavy for years without fully realizing how much of your energy and your attention was taking up. And the deep irony is that this feeling of relief and lightness and openness is so much closer to the state, to quote unquote the state, right, than anything you ever manufactured through deliberate effort and technique. And in that one moment, in that open space where all the methods used to live and take up room in your day, something quieter and more fundamental starts to become visible again. Something that was always there underneath all the layers but got completely buried, which is basically just your own natural and built-in ability to assume and expect and take action and receive without turning any of it into an elaborate daily production, right? The clarity that arrives right at the tail end of level 5 is a bit hard to describe in words, but it's immediately and unmistakably recognizable when you actually feel it settling into place. You finally understand, not intellectually, but in your whole body, that you were always the mechanism yourself. The techniques were all just elaborate and roundabout ways of giving yourself permission to do something you had the ability to do directly the entire time. And that clarity points you straight back towards the simplicity you started with at the very beginning of the curve, like we talked about earlier. Which means the bell curve is about to start its descent down to the other side, back towards the same quiet and unforced place where you began this whole journey. And the strange thing about being genuinely ready for the next phase is that it feels a lot like giving up on the whole project entirely. forgetting about it really for some time, which is honestly the last thing you'd ever expect real forward progress to feel like after spending years operating under the belief that effort and precision and technique and discipline are what make the results happen when it comes to manifestation. But that feeling of giving up is actually the threshold itself. The people who push through it, who let go of the complexity, even though it feels reckless and irresponsible, are the ones who make it to the other side of the curve. The ones who can't let go just circle back into level 3 or 4, and then they start the whole cycle over again with a new teacher or a new method, right? Now, let's talk about coming back around. So this is where the bell curve completes its full arc. Level 6 and 7 are the other side of the curve that descend back into simplicity. And from the outside, the people at those levels look almost identical to the people at level 1 and 2. They just decide what they want and they expect it to show up, right? The critical difference, and it's the significant one, is that they've been through the entire curve from beginning to end. They understand at a deep and lived level why simplicity works and why complexity didn't. They're not naive about it, they're clear about it. And that hard-won clarity is what makes the simplicity completely unshakable in a way it could never have been at the very beginning of the journey. So there's a benefit through all of this at the end, right? Level 6 is where you come back to the basics fully and deliberately, but now with complete understanding of why the basics are all you ever actually needed, and is the most genuinely peaceful level in the entire framework because the searching and the striving and the daily optimizing are finally and truly over. And you can now clearly see that every technique you ever learned was really just a different packaging of the exact same one move, which is assuming the reality of what you want, living naturally from that assumption in your day-to-day life and taking action, creating an identity around it, really. And the technique itself was never the active ingredient at any point along the way. The core mechanism was always assumption, always. Like Neville Goddard said it in the plainest terms possible. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the whole thing. You just expect it to happen. You just have unwavering confidence that it's going to happen, so you detach completely from the outcome. And at level 6, you finally understand what that sentence actually means, right? In a way that goes well beyond intellectual knowledge into something you've personally lived through and tested and confirmed for yourself through years of direct experience on both sides of the curve. All the layers have been peeled away at this point. There's no more daily scripting sessions. You can keep them if you want, but now you understand the whole idea behind them. There's no more 369 sequences, no more tracking angel numbers on your phone throughout the day, no more checking your vibration or worrying about negative thoughts. It's just a clean and direct and beautifully uncluttered relationship between what you assume to be true and what eventually shows up in your actual life. And that stripped down simplicity creates a real and tangible freedom that is genuinely hard to overstate. The freedom to just live your full life naturally without the constant mental overhead of maintaining and managing and monitoring a separate manifestation practice running alongside everything else you've got going on. And going a bit deeper into what makes level 6 different from level 1, even though they look the same on the surface, is that the simplicity here is chosen rather than accidental, right? At level 1, it's simple because you don't know anything. At level 6, it's simple because you know everything, kind of, right? Which gives it a completely different quality and a completely different kind of resilience when things get challenging. You've tested the alternatives. You've spent real time in the complex middle stages of the curve. You know firsthand and from personal experience that more technique does not equal better results, and that knowledge isn't theoretical for you anymore. It's something you've lived through and come out the other side of, right? That lived experience creates a settledness that level 1 simply can't have, because level 1 simplicity was fragile and easy to knock over the moment someone introduced doubt or complexity, while level 6's simplicity has already survived the full weight of the complexity and come through it intact and even stronger. So at level 6, manifestation stops being a thing you do as a separate, deliberate activity in your day and becomes just a part of how you naturally move through the world, which is the best thing ever, right? You almost feel like you can predict things, that you can predict the future, essentially. That's the level of confidence you have to have in yourself. And that only comes once you understand all of this. And this sounds vague when you say it like that, but in actual practice, it just means that assuming the best possible outcome becomes your default setting rather than a special exercise you have to remember to perform, right? The effort fully and completely disappears at this level. You don't need to remind yourself to stay in the state or maintain your vibration or protect your energy or any of that, because all of those concepts have been replaced by something so much simpler and so much more stable, which is that just a natural and settled and quiet knowing that things tend to work out when you genuinely expect them to. That's it. If you take action too, by the way. So it feels natural at this point, the way breathing feels natural, which is the entire difference between level 6 and level 4. At level 4, you are forcing and monitoring and controlling. At level 6, you're just living from a different default. And the results take care of themselves without you having to manage every detail of the inner process. And the results at this level are actually far more consistent than anything you produced during the complex and effortful middle stages of the curve, which makes complete sense once you see the consistency always came from the stability and naturalness of the internal state rather than from the precision or correctness of any external technique you were running. So the daily experience of level 6 is honestly pretty ordinary and undramatic, right? You wake up, you go about your day, you make decisions from a place of quiet assumption rather than anxious hope or desperate technique, and things work out more often and more smoothly than they did when you were putting in 10 times the effort. And there's this quietness to it that would have felt boring or maybe insufficient when you were in the complex middle stages, because back then you equated effort with progress, and quiet felt like you weren't doing enough. And there was all this tension, right, that we were talking about. But now you understand that quiet is where the actual power always lived the whole time. It was in the simplicity of it. And like we discussed earlier with level 1, that trust is back now. That same easy and unforced trust, except this time you understand exactly why it works. And that understanding makes it genuinely unshakable in a way level 1's innocent version of trust could never have been on its own. Now, level 7 is the very end of the curve. And the thing that makes it so genuinely fascinating is that from the outside, it looks exactly and indistinguishably like the very beginning. You decide what you want, you expect it, you go about your day taking action without monitoring or checking or adjusting, and that's the entirety of it. The difference between level 7 and level 1, and this is the whole point of the bell curve framework, is not what you do, but the fullness and the understanding behind what you do, right? At level 1, the simplicity was accidental, like we discussed, and easy to shake. At level 7, it's chosen and completely unshakable. You've personally seen and tried the entire landscape of methods and systems and frameworks out there, and you've come back deliberately and consciously to the most basic version of the process because you know from years of direct experience that absolutely nothing more complicated is necessary. So there's a depth and a resilience to level 7, to that version of simplicity that level 1 simply cannot have. And that resilience is what really makes it hold up when things get difficult or when doubt comes knocking at the door, which it still does. Occasionally, it always does, even at this level. You don't spiral back into technique. You don't reach for a new method. You just return to the assumption, let it settle, and keep moving in the real world, taking action in reality, knowing that the thing is coming. Now, level 7 is a quiet level. There's nothing flashy or dramatic or impressive about it at all. There's no vision boards on the wall. There might be, but they're not needed, right? There's no scripting journal on the nightstand. There might be, but it's not needed. You know that you don't need it anymore. There's no affirmation recordings queued up on your phone. There might be, but you now know that you don't need them. Just a person who learned through the full and complete arc of the entire journey from beginning to end that the only thing that ever actually mattered was what they assumed to be true about themselves and their life, about their identity and their life, right? And the knowing at this level is different from belief, which is an important distinction. Belief still has a little bit of hope in it, right? A little bit of wanting it to be true. Knowing is something you know. There is no need to believe it. You just know it. Knowing is just settled and complete and done. Like knowing your name or knowing where you live. There's no effort required to maintain it and no anxiety attached to it. There's no hope around it. You just know it, right? And so the bell curve completes itself right here. The person at level 7 and the person at level 1 are doing the exact same thing from the outside looking in. The only real gap between them is understanding. And the person at level 1 doesn't know why it works. The person at level 7 has stopped needing to ask. And so the bell curve completes itself right here, right? The most advanced level of manifestation looks completely and utterly ordinary from the outside. And that is honestly the final and most important lesson of this entire framework. The truth was never hidden behind complexity or advanced technique or secret teachings, even though you most likely will only get to this realization after you go through the whole bell curve. It was hidden behind simplicity, which happens to be the one place that most people stuck in the overcrowded middle of the curve absolutely refuse to look. Now, I'm explaining all of this knowing that you will most likely go through the entire bell curve, right? But why this training is hopefully valuable to you is that the most important part is not getting stuck in levels 3 to 5, right? You need to move on from that at some point. There's a real and settled and lasting peace that comes with arriving at this level, level 7, because you're no longer searching for the answer or optimizing your daily approach or wondering anxiously whether you're finally doing it right this time around. You've already been living the answer since level 1. You just had to go all the way around the entire curve to finally see it clearly for what it actually always was. And that's really the whole thing, the whole arc. The whole journey summarized in 7 levels that form a perfect loop from simplicity through complexity and back to simplicity again. And the only question that matters now is where you are on that curve and whether you're willing to let go of whatever's keeping you from moving to the other side of it. Level 7 doesn't feel like an achievement or a milestone or a destination you arrive at with a sense of accomplishment. It feels more like coming home to something you always had, which is the most anticlimactic and the most profoundly satisfying ending you could ask for at the same time. You're not a different person at level 7 than you were at level 1. You might be, but you're the same person really, with the same natural ability, with the same built-in capacity to assume and expect and receive. Nothing about that specifically changed. The only thing that's changed is that you now understand what you're doing and why it works, and that understanding lets you do it with full confidence and complete peace of mind. Right? The journey is over at this point to a degree. Not because you've mastered some advanced skill or unlocked some hidden level of consciousness, but because you've realized there was never anything to master in the first place. There was only something to remember, and now you remember it, and that's enough. So from here on, it's just living, just being, just moving through your days with a quiet and unshakable assumption and confidence that what you want is yours. The same way you did at level 1, except now you'll never lose it again because you understand exactly what it is and why it works and how you almost buried it under years of complexity that was never needed. And that's the gift of going through the whole curve, the thing that makes the journey worth it, even though the destination turns out to be where you started, right? You needed to go through it to understand what you had. You needed the complexity and knowledge, really, to appreciate the simplicity. This is why I said it's not bad to collect the knowledge, just don't get stuck there. You needed to lose the natural state to value it enough to protect it going forward. It really is that simple. That's the punchline the bell curve has been building towards this whole time. The beginner and the master land in the same place. Everyone else is overcomplicating it in the middle, and the way out of the middle is to stop adding and start subtracting until there's nothing left but the one thing that always worked. So with that said, let's go over the review. We talked about the overview, where everyone starts, the complexity trap, coming back around, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. First, figure out honestly where you are on the curve right now. And if you're somewhere in the middle, buried under a stack of techniques and methods and daily rituals, recognize that the complexity itself might be the single biggest thing holding you back from the results you've been working so hard to produce. Then start removing layers this week, one at a time. Drop a technique, then drop another one next week, and pay real and honest attention to whether your actual results change at all, or whether the only thing that changes is how much mental energy you are spending on the whole process every single day. And finally, practice the level 7 move, which is Also, the level 1 move: decide what you want, expect it fully, go about your day, take action in real life, and let the simplicity feel uncomfortable at first if it needs to, because that discomfort is just your mind adjusting to the realization that it genuinely can be this easy and this straightforward, and that it probably always was. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this training. If you did, and if you want the document along with the training, make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. As always, if you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. We help entrepreneurs and high performers basically master their health, wealth, love, and self, their health, wealth, love, and mind through one complete self-mastery system. So book a call from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on improving in every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the newsletter, again, from the link in the description. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the support as always, and I'm going to see you in the next one. All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is every version of you already exists and how that's possible. As you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is the superposition of you, the filter behind your eyes, the gorilla in your life, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, as always, if you want this training along with its respective document, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. If you want to work with me one-on-one, then make sure to book a call, again, from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on improving in every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the newsletter from the link in the description. With that said, let's get started and talk about the superposition of you. So there's this physicist named Carlo Rovelli, and he wrote a book called Reality Is Not What It Seems, where he basically lays out something that can change how you think about everything, not just in terms of physics, but yourself, your life, your sense of who you are, and what's really possible for you. And it starts with this one idea that at the very smallest scale of reality, at the quantum level, things don't have one fixed shape or one definite state. They exist in what physicists call superposition, which basically means every possible version of that thing is happening simultaneously, all layered on top of each other until something forces it to pick one. And that something, that force, is observation, it's measurement, it's attention. So what makes this so wild is that it's literally how the physical universe operates at its most fundamental level, where a single particle can be in multiple places at the same time, existing as a blur of probabilities rather than a fixed point, which means the building blocks of everything you see around you, including yourself, are not really solid, locked-in things, but fluid overlapping possibilities that are just waiting to be collapsed into one definite outcome. And so if you really sit with that for a second, what it's really telling you is that reality itself at the deepest layer is not one fixed thing. It's a stack of every possible version happening at once, and only the act of looking at it, of measuring it, of placing your conscious attention on it, forces it to become something specific and definite. And this has been demonstrated in labs for almost 100 years now. It's one of the most tested and confirmed findings in the entire history of science. So we're not working with wishful thinking here. We're working with how the universe actually functions. Which is why this matters for everything we're about to get into, because if the fabric of reality itself operates on the principle that all possibilities exist simultaneously until attention collapses them into one, then the question for us in our lives becomes something very different from how do we become better? It becomes more so about which version of ourselves is our attention collapsing into existence right now. Because the same principle applies to you as almost a direct parallel, where every version of you already exists right now in this moment. The disciplined one, the scattered one, the focused one, the distracted one, the one who follows through, and the one who quits. They're all layered on top of each other, all running simultaneously. And the version that shows up today, the one that becomes real, is your actual lived experience, is whichever one your attention is pointed at. And that's the part that most people miss. They think that the better version of themselves is somewhere in the future, something they have to build towards over months or years of grinding. And that's one way, but that's not what the physics is showing us, right? Every version is here right now, in this moment, not down the road. So the real question was never about how to become that person. It was always about what is collapsing you into this one. And the answer, just like in quantum physics, is measurement. It's observation. It's wherever your attention keeps landing over and over, day after day. That's the version of you that solidifies in your reality. And honestly, you've probably already experienced this without having the language for it. Because think about what happens, for example, when you decide to buy a specific car or anything for that matter. We can also go for shoes. And then suddenly you see that car everywhere, or those shoes everywhere. In terms of the car, you'll probably start seeing it on the highway, in the parking lots, in ads. It was always there, but your attention wasn't tuned to it. And the moment you made it relevant to you, the world seemed to rearrange itself around that decision, which is superposition and collapse playing out in the most mundane, obvious way imaginable. The car didn't multiply. It's not like suddenly more people have that car. It's just that your filter just started letting it through. And this is really the whole thing, the entire thesis of this training, that attention is the collapse mechanism, is the force that takes all of those overlapping possibilities and turns one of them into something concrete and real and lived. Which means your attention is not just some passive thing floating around in your head, it's the most powerful tool you have for determining which version of you actually shows up in the world. And when I say attention, I don't mean positive thinking or repeating affirmations. I mean the actual sustained direction of your conscious awareness towards specific things, specific evidence, specific patterns, specific truths about yourself and your life, because that's what does the collapsing, genuinely and repeatedly placing your focus on the version of you that you want to be real until your entire perceptual system starts organizing itself around that version. And the key word there is sustained, because a fleeting thought doesn't collapse anything, right? Just like a brief glance at a particle doesn't force it into a state, it takes consistent, repeated, deliberate attention over time to shift which version of you becomes the default, which is why most people stay stuck. They think about the better version for 5 minutes and then they spend the rest of their day measuring themselves against the old one and doing what the old version of them does. And it goes both ways too, because your attention doesn't just build up the version you want, it also reinforces the version you don't want every time you give it focus, every time you dwell on your failures or your limitations or your worst moments or failures. You're collapsing yourself into that version just as powerfully, just as reliably, which means the discipline isn't just about what you focus on, it's equally about what you stop focusing on. So if you take nothing else from this section, take this. You're not one fixed person, right? You're a superposition of every possible version of yourself, and the mechanism that determines which one becomes real is not time, it's not effort, it's not luck. It can be, but it's not the only thing. It's the sustained direction of your attention. And once you really get that, you'll stop trying to quote unquote build a new you and start learning how to collapse the one that's already there. And again, this is the actual operating principle of reality at its most fundamental level, adapted into a framework that you can use for your own life. And it's a genuine shift in how you approach everything, because now, instead of asking what you need to do to become that person, you can start asking yourself where your attention is right now and which version of you it's reinforcing. And the thing that makes this framework so different is that it puts the entire thing back in your own hands. Because if the version of you that you want to be already exists and the only thing determining which one shows up is where you place your attention, then there's no more waiting for the right moment or for the right circumstances or the right person to come along and change things for you. The power was always yours. It was always about the measurement. And you've been the one holding the instrument this entire time, whether you knew it or not. And your brain actually has a built-in biological system whose entire job is really to determine which version of reality you get to experience on a moment-to-moment basis. And it does this by filtering what you see, what you hear, what you notice, and what you completely miss. So what we've covered so far is the physics, the principle, the idea that all versions exist and attention collapses them. And that's the foundation. But the next piece is even more important because your brain has hardware that's been doing this collapsing for you automatically your entire life, mostly without you knowing about it or having any say in how it's been configured. And that's the thing that should both excite you and make you a little uncomfortable, because it means you've been collapsing yourself into specific versions of yourself for years, not by conscious choice, but by default settings. And the good news is that this hardware can be reconfigured. It can be retuned. It can be pointed in a completely different direction, which is exactly what we're going to break down in the next section. So let's talk about the filter behind your eyes. So now that you've got the physics down, the idea that every version of you exists simultaneously and attention is what collapses one into reality, let's talk about the biological mechanism that's actually doing the filtering inside your head. Like we discussed, your brain has a real physical system called the reticular activating system, or the RAS. And its entire job is really deciding what gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets deleted before you even notice it was there. Now, the RAS is this bundle of nerves sitting at the base of your brainstem, and it's essentially the gatekeeper between the raw flood of sensory information hitting you every second and the tiny, tiny fraction of it that actually makes it into your conscious experience. And we're talking about a genuinely absurd ratio here. Roughly 11 million bits of sensory data per second coming in, and your conscious mind can only process about 50 of them. So the RAS is choosing those 50, and everything else just disappears. So your RAS filters 99.999% of reality. And really think about that ratio for a second. 11 million to 50. That means 99.9999 something percent of what's happening around you right now, in this room, in your life, in your field of possibility, is being actively deleted by your brain before you ever even get a chance to perceive it. Which means the reality you're experiencing is not reality at all. It's just a curated highlight reel selected by a filter you probably never consciously set. And the RAS doesn't filter randomly. That's the crucial part. It filters based on what you have told it matters, right? Through your beliefs, through your repeated thoughts, your dominant emotional states, your habitual focus, all of that programs the RAS like a search algorithm. And then it dutifully goes out and finds evidence that matches, which means you're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing the world as your RAS has been programmed to show it to you. And where it connects back to what we talked about earlier in the last section is that if attention is the collapse mechanism, the thing that determines which version of you becomes real, then the RAS is the hardware that's executing that collapse automatically every second of every day based on whatever programming it's currently running. And this is also why confirmation bias is so powerful and so hard to break, because the RAS is literally designed to confirm whatever you already believe. So if you believe you're unlucky or unworthy or behind in life, your RAS will scan through those 11 million bits of data per second and surface the 50 that prove you right. And the thousands of bits that disprove it, or millions, the opportunities, the compliments, the evidence that you're actually doing fine, all of that gets deleted before it reaches your awareness. And so what ends up happening is you end up in this loop where your belief programs the RAS filters your reality to match those beliefs, and then that filtered reality reinforces the original beliefs, which programs the RAS even further in the same direction, and round it goes. Most people live their entire lives inside this loop without ever realizing the filter is even there. So what makes this so tricky? Because the filtering is invisible, you can't feel it happening, you just experience the end result as though that's simply how things are or who you are. And it feels so completely true and objective and real that it never occurs to you that you're only seeing a tiny, heavily curated slice of what's actually available to you. And you've probably felt this in real life. Like, think about the last time you were in a bad mood and suddenly everything seemed to go wrong. The traffic was worse, the people were ruder, the day just felt heavier in every direction. And then think about a day where you were genuinely excited about something and suddenly the world seemed full of good signs and good things and lucky breaks and things just clicking into place. The world didn't actually change between those 2 days. Your RAS did. Your filter shifted based on your emotional state at that time, and it served you a completely different slice of the same reality. And the really sobering part is that for most people, the RAS was programmed by default, not by conscious choice, meaning your parents, your environment, your early experiences, your failures, your traumas, your culture, all of that installed filters that have been running in the background for years or decades. Even the information you consume, really. Automatically collapsing you into a version of yourself that you never actually chose, and you've been living inside that collapsed version for so long that it feels like regular life. Like if you grew up hearing that money is hard to make, or that people like you don't get ahead, or that you're not the smart one in the family, those messages didn't just make you feel bad for a moment. They literally programmed your RAS, especially if they were repeated, to filter reality in a way that's consistently confirming those messages. So you walk through life seeing evidence of those limitations everywhere, while the contradicting evidence gets deleted in real time. This is also why people that constantly binge watch and binge read negative news will think that the world is ending every single day, right? And so every time you experience something that seemed to confirm those installed beliefs, the filter got stronger, more refined, more locked in, which is why deeply held limiting beliefs feel so unshakably true. It's not that they're actually true, it's that your RAS has gotten extremely good at surfacing only the evidence that supports them while scrubbing everything else from your awareness. And the whole point of understanding this is to realize that those filters were never chosen by you, most likely. They were installed without your consent, and they've been running on autopilot ever since, which means the version of yourself you've been collapsed into all this time is not the only version available. It's just the one your default programming selected. And here's where it flips, and here's what makes the RAS so powerful once you understand it, because the same system that's been working against you can be deliberately retuned to work for you. And the process is way simpler than you might think. It's about consistently and deliberately controlling your awareness and directing your attention towards the evidence, the beliefs, and the patterns and the possibilities that match the version of you that you actually want to collapse into reality. And it's not about lying to yourself or pretending that things are just great when they're not. It's about consciously choosing to notice what your RAS has been deleting and to actively look for the opportunities it's been scrubbing, to seek out the evidence of your capability that's been filtering away. Because that evidence is there. It's always been there. You just haven't been able to see it because your filter wasn't tuned to let it through. Think about it, guys. With 11 million bits of data per second, the evidence is there. And like anything, it takes practice and repetition. This system has been running for 20 or 30 or 40 years for some of you. You won't reprogram it overnight, but every time you deliberately shift your attention and every time you catch yourself running the old filter and consciously redirect, you're rewriting the programming a little bit more. And over time, the new filter starts running automatically the same way the old one did. And the most important thing about all of this is that just knowing the RAS exists and understanding what it does is already the first step in changing it. Once you're aware that your experience of reality is being filtered, once you genuinely understand that what you're seeing is not the full picture but a tiny curated selection based on old programming, you can't fully go back to take your default perceptions at face value anymore, and you shouldn't. That awareness alone will start to loosen up the old filter even before you do anything deliberate to change it. And so what we've got now is a pretty complete picture of the mechanism. The physics says that all versions exist simultaneously and attention collapses them into one reality. The biology says your RAS is the hardware doing that collapsing automatically based on its programming, and that the practical takeaway is that you can retune the RAS by deliberately shifting what you pay attention to. But there's one more piece, one more example that shows you just how aggressively your brain filters reality and just how much you're missing because of it. And that's what we're going to get into next. And I want you to notice how all of this connects, right? The physics and the biology aren't two separate ideas. They're the same idea at different scales. The quantum level and the neural level, both saying the same thing. That reality is not fixed, that observation, attention determines outcome, and that what you pay attention to is literally what becomes real for you. And that convergence, the fact that The most fundamental law of physics and one of the most fundamental functions of your brain are both telling you the same thing, should tell you something about how important this principle is. And once you see the next piece, the experiment we're about to talk about, you'll understand exactly how blind your current filter is making you and exactly how much of your life is happening right in front of your face without you even knowing it. So let's talk about the gorilla in your life. So there's this famous experiment in psychology run by two researchers named Christopher Chabry and Daniel Simmons. And it goes like this. They showed the people a video of two teams passing basketballs. One team in white shirts, one team in black shirts. And they told the viewers to count the number of passes made by the team in white. Just focus on the team in white and basically count their passes. And while the viewers were focused on counting, a person in a full gorilla suit walks right into the middle of the scene, faces the camera, beats their chest, and then walks off. And when they asked the viewers afterwards, did you see the gorilla? About half of them had absolutely no idea there was a gorilla, and they missed it completely, totally invisible to them. And the thing that makes this experiment so powerful is that the gorilla isn't subtle. It's not hiding in the corner or flashing by for a split second. It literally walks right through the middle of the frame. It stops, it faces you directly, it beats its chest, is there for a solid 9 seconds, and still half the people looking at the screen cannot see it because their attention is locked into something else and their RAS is aggressively deleting everything that doesn't match the task at hand. Now this shows you just how ruthless the filtering is. Your brain didn't blur the gorilla or make it slightly harder to notice. It completely removed it from conscious experience, as if the gorilla did not exist in that person's reality, even though it was right there. And that's exactly what your RAS is doing with everything in your life that doesn't match your current programming. So this is the literal mechanism by which you're missing things in your life right now. Real things, real opportunities, real evidence, real possibilities that are right in front of you in plain sight that your brain is scrubbing from your awareness because your filter isn't tuned to let them through. And so now bring this back to everything we've been talking about, the superposition, the RAS, the collapse mechanism, and think about what this means for you specifically. If half the people in that experiment couldn't see a gorilla standing right in front of them just because they were focused on counting passes, then what are you not seeing in your own life because you're focused on counting the wrong things? When someone genuinely believes they never get opportunities or that nothing good ever happens to them or that they're stuck for reasons they can't identify, they're probably telling the truth from their perspective. They genuinely don't see opportunities. They genuinely experience a reality where nothing seems to be working. But it's not because the opportunities aren't there. It's because their RAS is filtering them out. The gorilla is walking right through their life and they can't see it. So which passes have you been counting is the question. What have you told your RAS to focus on? What filter are you running? And is that filter showing you reality or a tiny biased outdated slice of it that's keeping you collapse into a version of yourself you didn't even consciously choose? And what really makes this experiment interesting is when you start to think about the scope of it, because that was a simple controlled two-dimensional video on a screen where the only task was to count passes. And even in that stripped down setting, half the people missed something enormous and obvious. Now think about your actual life, which is infinitely more complex than this scenario. It's more layered, it's more overwhelming with information, and ask yourself how much you're probably missing every single day just because your RAS has been told to focus on a narrow set of things that may not even serve you anymore. And this is really a call for radical honesty with yourself, because once you understand the gorilla experiment and what it reveals about how attention works, you have to be willing to sit with the uncomfortable possibility that your entire experience of how things are just maybe has been incomplete this whole time. That the life you think you're living is just the version your filter has been showing you. And that a completely different experience of the same life has been available to you all along. And has been hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to change what you're measuring. And this is probably the real reframe of this entire training, that the thing I really want you to walk away with above everything else, which is that your problem was probably never a lack of ability or a lack of opportunity or a lack of resources. Your problem was a filter that was tuned to delete the very things that could change your life. And the version of you that has those things, that sees those things, that lives in that reality where those things are obvious and everywhere, that version already exists. It's in the superposition. It's been there this whole time. You just couldn't see it because your gorilla was invisible. And the comfort in all of this is the word already, because the version of you that's focused, disciplined, confident, capable, successful in whatever way matters to you, that version already exists in your superposition. You don't have to go out and find it or earn it or deserve it. You just have to stop collapsing into the other one by changing where your attention goes and what your RAS is programmed to surface. And the best part is that you can start today, like right now. Because every single moment is a new measurement, a new observation, a new chance to collapse a different version of yourself into reality. And the accumulation of those moments, those small deliberate shifts in your attention, is how the filter gets rewritten and how a completely different version of your life starts showing up. And if nothing else, just hold on to this one truth from everything we've covered. You are not one fixed person. You never were. You're every version of yourself simultaneously. And the one that becomes real is the one you keep measuring, the one you keep observing and giving attention to, the one your attention keeps collapsing into existence. And once you know that, once you really absorb it, you can't unknow it, and life is never quite the same again. And that knowing is permanent. That's the thing. Once you see the gorilla, you can never unsee it. Once you understand that your filter has been curating your reality this whole time, you can't go back to thinking your experience is just the way things are. And that awareness alone, that simple recognition that you've been living inside a filtered, collapsed, partial version of what's actually possible for you, that's the beginning of everything. And it really just is the beginning, because understanding the mechanism is step one. The ongoing work is the daily, deliberate, consistent retuning of your attention, of your RAS, of your measurement, and taking control of your awareness so that the version of you that collapses into reality tomorrow is closer to the one that you actually want. And the day after that, even closer. And the day after that, even closer. Not because you're building something new, but because you're finally letting something that was always there become visible. So with that said, let's talk about the review. We went over the superposition of you, the filter behind your eyes, the gorilla in your life, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. First, start a daily attention audit where you spend 5 minutes at the end of each day writing down what you focused on most, what thoughts dominated, what evidence your brain kept surfacing, and honestly assess which version of you that attention pattern is collapsing into reality. Then, for the next 7 days, deliberately look for the gorillas in your life by actively asking yourself, what am I not seeing right now? And what opportunities or evidence is my RAS probably filtering out? And write down at least one thing per day that you notice only because you went looking for it. And then finally, pick one specific belief or identity statement that you know your RAS has been programmed to confirm. Something like the belief that you never follow through or that you're not good at something specific. And for 30 days, deliberately direct your attention towards every single piece of evidence, no matter how small, that contradicts it, training your filter to surface a different reality. With that said, if you want this training along with this document, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. If you want to work with me one-on-one on any of this, then make sure to book a call from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on improving in every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then as always, make sure to join the newsletter from the link in the description. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is how to control energy before it turns into your reality. As you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, the energy precedes reality principle, the control layer, engineering your energetic output, the review, and your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, if you want to work with me one-on-one, then make sure to book a call from the link in the description. We work with entrepreneurs, high performers, and professionals to basically help them master every aspect of their life and every pillar of their life, which in our opinion, or in my opinion, is health, wealth, love, and self. And happiness takes care of itself when you take care of these pillars. With that said, if you want this training along with this document, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description, where we publish all of these trainings along with their respective texts. And if you want weekly newsletters helping you improve every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the free newsletter, again, from the link in the description. With that said, let's get started and talk about the energy precedes reality principle. So a lot of people think reality creates their energy. Something good happens, so they feel good. Something bad happens, so they feel bad. And their entire emotional and energetic state is really just a reaction to whatever is going on around them. And that's the default mode, and it's completely backwards. So the actual sequence, the one that every high-performing person eventually figures out, is that energy comes first. Your internal state precedes and shapes your external reality, not the other way around. Now, the conventional understanding of the energy reality sequence is that external events determine your internal state, and almost everyone operates from this assumption without ever really questioning it. And it feels very obvious, and it feels obviously true, that most people would never really think to examine whether there's another way the sequence could work. Now, the default sequence goes like this. Something happens in your external world, you react emotionally to that event, and the emotional reaction then determines your energy for the next period of time, whatever that is. And that energy influences your behavior, which then influences your results, which creates the next external event, and the cycle repeats. And when you're operating from the default sequence, your entire life is very reactive, where your energy is basically determined by whatever happened most recently, and good days are the ones where good things happen to you, and bad days are the ones where bad things happen to you. Very common sense, right? And you have almost no control over the overall trajectory of your experience. And the default sequence puts you in a position where your state is always at the mercy of basically external forces, meaning you're essentially a passenger in your own experience. And that passenger position is so normalized that most people don't even realize that there's actually an alternative. And the inversion of the sequence is basically recognizing that your internal energy state can be set independently of external circumstances, and that the energy you bring to a situation essentially shapes the situation far more than the situation shapes your energy. So when you set your energy first before any external event, your energy becomes the cause rather than the effect. And this is a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own experience, where you move from being shaped by reality to shaping reality through the energy you bring to it. And you've actually experienced this inversion already, even if you didn't label it this way exactly. You've had days where you woke up in a great state, right? And everything seemed to go well. Even if things weren't going well, it seemed like they were going well, because now your perception is different because of your energy. And days where you woke up in a terrible state and everything seemed to go wrong happened too. And the difference wasn't luck. It was the energy you were carrying into each interaction and each decision that day. And so the mechanism by which energy precedes reality is actually quite straightforward when you break it down, and it operates through perception, behavior, and also social dynamics, all of which are directly influenced by your internal energetic state in ways that compound throughout the entire day. Now, your energy state directly filters your perception, meaning when you're in a high energy positive state, you literally see opportunities and connections and possibilities that are invisible to you when you're in a low energy negative state. And this perceptual filtering means that the same objective reality looks completely different than depending on what energy you're bringing to it, right? So the brain's reticular activating system selectively highlights information that matches your current state, which means a confident high energy person and an anxious depleted person will walk through the same room and see completely different things. Or they might see the same objective reality, the same exact things, but they will perceive them differently. Their interpretation of whatever is happening in that room will be very, very different. And because their interpretation is different, they'll get different results. And so these different perceptions, perspectives, and interpretations lead to completely different actions and completely different outcomes. And the perceptual filtering compounds throughout the day, where a high energy morning typically leads to seeing an opportunity that leads to a positive interaction that then reinforces the high energy that leads to seeing the next opportunity. And that upward spiral is essentially the mechanism by which energy creates reality in real time. And so your energy state directly determines the quality and character of your behavior, where high energy states produce decisive, creative, proactive behavior, and you've probably experienced this, while low energy states produce hesitant, reactive, and avoidant behavior. And the behavioral difference alone is really enough to explain a massive divergence in outcomes between two people in identical circumstances. So the quality of your work and your conversations and your decisions and your presence is directly proportional to the quality of your energy when you're doing them. And this means that managing your energy is actually the highest leverage productivity strategy available, higher leverage than time management or skill development or any other optimization. And so consistent high energy behavior over time produces compound results that also look like talent or luck to outside observers, but are actually just the accumulated output of someone who's been showing up in a peak state day after day after day. And so there's also a societal interpersonal kind of dimension to energy, where the energy you carry into any interaction directly influences how other people respond to you. And this social effect also amplifies the individual effects of perception and behavior into something way larger. So energy is contagious in social settings, meaning the person with the strongest frame and with the strongest energy in any room tends to set the tone for the entire interaction. And when you consistently show up with high, clear, intentional energy, you naturally influence the energy of the people around you, which changes the dynamics of every interaction in your favor. And so this energetic influence operates below conscious awareness, where people don't think about why they feel more engaged in your presence or more open or more collaborative around you. They just do. And that unconscious influence creates opportunities and connections that would never emerge if you basically showed up in a depleted or reactive state. And so the social reciprocity of energy also means that when you bring high energy into an interaction, people tend to match it and bring their best as well, which means your energetic investment creates a multiplied return through the elevated responses of everyone around you. And over long time horizons, your consistent energetic state determines what you attract into your life, meaning the people, opportunities, and circumstances that show up tend to match the frequency you're operating at. And at the very least, even if they don't, you perceive them in that way, so you're better off regardless. And so this attraction dynamic is one of the most powerful and most misunderstood forces, in my opinion, in personal development. Now, people and opportunities that match your energy are naturally drawn towards you, while those that don't match tend to fall away. And this natural matching process, operating over months and years, gradually reshapes your entire life to essentially reflect whatever energy you're consistently putting out. And it relates a lot to the mirror principle, where who you are is what you will get, right? And this matching dynamic also means you bear a real responsibility for your energetic state, where the life you're living right now, to a significant degree, is a reflection of the energy you've been consistently carrying and putting out, and accepting that responsibility is uncomfortable, but also very necessary for real change. And while it's uncomfortable, it is freeing as well, because if you had the power to get your life to the position it is in right now, then you also have the power to change, right? So with that said, let's talk about the control layer. So energy precedes reality. That's the principle. Now the question is, how do you actually control your energy? How do you set it deliberately rather than letting it be determined by whatever happens to you? And the answer is that energy control is a skill. It's something you build through specific practices applied consistently over time. And the practices are not really complicated. They're just rarely taught and even more rarely applied with the discipline that they actually require. Now, the first step in energy control is awareness, meaning you develop the ability to accurately perceive your own current energetic state at any given moment. And while this sounds very simple, most people go through their entire day without ever checking in with their own energy level. And I think that lack of awareness means that they can't manage what they can't see. And Charlie Munger said something similar, or at least it's attributed to him, where you can't improve what you don't measure, right? And I'm paraphrasing here, but you get the gist. Building a practice of regular energy monitoring throughout the day, where you pause every hour or two and honestly assess your current state on a simple scale, will give you data that most people never have. And most people don't even think that they can do this. And that data will reveal patterns, triggers, and rhythms that are the foundation for energy management. And the monitoring also reveals your personal energy patterns, meaning the times of day when your energy naturally peaks and dips, and the activities that energize versus deplete you, and the triggers that shift your state in predictable ways. And so understanding those patterns is what will allow you to design your day around them rather than fighting against them, which a lot of the times is an exercise in futility. And recording the monitoring data in your journal will also create a record that reveals macro patterns that are invisible in the moment, like how your sleep quality may be affected your energy the next day, or for example, how certain types of social interactions consistently drain you. And those macro patterns are the most actionable insights for longer-term energy optimization. Now, awareness also includes identifying your specific energy triggers, both positive and negative, meaning the people, situations, thoughts, and environments that predictably shift your energy in a particular direction. And knowing these triggers will give you the ability to either seek them out or avoid them deliberately. So identifying your top 5 negative energy triggers and creating strategies for handling each one, whether that's avoidance or reframing or preloading a positive state before the exposure, eliminates the most common sources of energy depletion in your daily life. And equally, identifying your top 5 positive energy triggers and deliberately incorporating more of them into your daily routine creates a base level of energy that's higher than what most people experience. And that elevated baseline will make everything else in your day work better. For me, that's, for example, working out. I do it every single day because of that reason, right? It's a positive energy trigger for me. My whole day just feels better. And, you can prove that by countless of studies and research where working out does, in fact, increase your energy. And so you need to find yours. Maybe that's working out. Maybe it's something else. But once you have awareness, the next step is really developing the ability to deliberately shift your state, meaning you can move from a low energy depleted state to a high energy resourceful state through intentional practice rather than waiting for external circumstances to change your mood. Now, the fastest and most reliable way to shift your state is through your body, meaning changes in your physiology directly and immediately change your emotional and energetic state. Tony Robbins said something similar here, where he said motion creates emotion, right? Even 2 minutes of intense physical movement, whether that's jumping or walking briskly or doing push-ups, produces a measurable shift in your neurochemistry and your subjective energy level. And this is the fastest state change tool available, faster than any mental technique or affirmation. On top of that, deliberate breathing patterns like box breathing, where you have 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, and 4 hold, meaning seconds, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, and then 4 seconds hold again. For calming or rapid breathing, for energizing, all of those will give you precise control over your autonomic nervous system, which is the master switch for your energetic state. And so learning to use that switch deliberately is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, and you can by using your breath. Now, the mental dimension of state control also involves choosing your focus deliberately, meaning you direct your own attention towards thoughts, memories, and mental images that produce the state you want, rather than letting your attention wander into whatever happens to be most salient or most anxious at the moment. Now, your energy follows your focus with almost perfect correlation, meaning whatever you're paying attention to is determining your state. And this means that managing your attention is managing your energy. And the ability to redirect your attention from depleting thoughts to energizing ones is a direct lever on your energetic state. And a deliberate morning priming practice, for example, where you spend the first 10 to 15 minutes of your day intentionally setting your own focus on your goals, your identity, and your gratitude, will establish an energetic foundation that carries through the entire day for the rest of the day. And this is just one example here. Now, the third piece of energy control is maintenance, meaning you build daily systems and habits that sustain your energy throughout the day rather than allowing it to crash and requiring constant recovery. So the foundational energy habits are sleep, nutrition, movement, and hydration. And yes, they sound super basic, but most people are underperforming in at least two of these four. And so the cumulative effect of poor sleep or poor nutrition or insufficient movement or dehydration or a combination of any of those is an energy deficit that really no mental technique can actually overcome. Sleep is the single most impactful variable for daily energy. And so improving your sleep quality by even 15 to 20% through consistent sleep times, for example, or reduced screen exposure before bed, or using some kind of blue light blockers in a cool, dark room will produce a dramatic improvement in your baseline energy that will compound across every aspect of your performance for the rest of the day and for the rest of the week, honestly. And you might have noticed that even one bad night of sleep kind of can derail your whole week, right? And you can't catch up on sleep. Now, daily movement, even 20 to 30 minutes of moderate exercise, produces neurochemical changes that elevate your energy for the entire day. And the energy investment of the exercise session will pay back many times over in increased productivity, clarity, and emotional stability throughout the remaining hours. So you might think that you're wasting time when in reality, movement is a multiplier. Now, building deliberate recovery periods into your day, like short breaks between deep work blocks or a brief afternoon reset, will also prevent the progressive energy depletion that most people experience as the day goes on. And those recovery periods will also allow you to maintain a consistently high energy level from morning to evening rather than experiencing the typical afternoon crash. So working in rhythm with your ultradian cycles, meaning 90 minutes of focused work, followed by anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes of genuine rest, will maintain your energy at a sustainably high level throughout the whole day. And also this rhythmic approach will produce more total output than the conventional approach of powering through until you crash, which for a lot of people is not really a lot of focused work anyway. So the quality of the recovery matters as much as the duration. And I've mentioned this a lot of times, where genuine renewal activities like a brief walk or some stretching or even just sitting quietly and staring at a wall with zero inputs produce much better energy restoration than so-called breaks that involve social media or email or some watching videos and so on, which are actually energy draining disguised as rest. Now, with that covered, let's move into engineering your energetic output. So you understand the principle, energy precedes reality. You've developed the control layer, awareness, state management, maintenance. Now the final piece is learning to engineer your energetic output for specific situations and goals, meaning you don't just maintain a generally high energy, you learn to calibrate and direct your energy with precision towards the outcomes that you want to produce. So different situations call for different types of energy, right? If you're having a laid back conversation with a friend, you're not going to be acting in the same way as you do on a sales call, hopefully, right? And learning to calibrate your energy to match the needs of each specific context is what separates someone who's generally energetic from someone who's strategically powerful, where the right energy in the right situation produces outsized results that raw intensity alone can never achieve. So a creative work session, for example, calls for a more relaxed, open, exploratory energy, while a negotiation call maybe needs more grounded, clear, assertive energy. And a relationship conversation calls for a warm, present, receptive energy. So the ability to shift between those modes deliberately, matching your energy to the context rather than bringing the same energy to every situation, is a sophisticated skill that produces dramatically better outcomes across every area of your life. I can't tell you how many times I see it where entrepreneurs work all day, they're on sales calls, they have negotiation calls, etc. They maybe are on their computer writing all day, and then they go with that same energy to their family. And then they wonder why there's so many misunderstandings between them and their significant other, for example. It's not the same, right? You can't just you can't switch so quickly. So you're just carrying the same energy you carried all day from your business into your relationship, and it doesn't work that way. Energy mismatches, like bringing aggressive energy to a creative session or scattered energy to a focused task, or what I just mentioned, are one of the most common and most costly mistakes people make. And most people don't even realize they're doing it because they've never learned to distinguish between different types of energy or to calibrate deliberately. And the calibration starts before the activity begins, where you take 30 seconds to a minute or a bit more, maybe 5 minutes, to set your energy for the upcoming task or the upcoming situation, applying that same priming principle to individual activities throughout the day rather than just the morning. And learning to modulate your intensity, meaning how much energy you're bringing to any given moment, prevents the common pattern of burnout that comes from running at maximum intensity all the time, and the ability to dial your energy up for key moments and dial it down for recovery periods will create a more sustainable high performance over months and years. So identifying the 2 to 3 moments in your day that benefit most from peak energy, and then deliberately saving your highest intensity for those moments rather than spreading it evenly across the entire day, will produce a much larger total impact from the same total energy budget. And energy conservation during low leverage activities, meaning you consciously dial down your intensity during, for example, admin work or some chores around home or errands or routine tasks and transitions, will preserve your capacity for the high leverage moments that actually matter. And that conservation mindset will treat your energy as the finite resource it is. And now, beyond calibration, you can also learn to direct your energy towards specific outcomes, meaning you use your energetic state as a tool for manifestation in the practical, non-mystical sense of the word, where the energy you bring to a goal shapes the actions you take and the opportunities you see, and therefore shapes the outcome. So combining a high energy state with detailed visualization of your desired outcome will create a powerful alignment between your internal state and then your external goals, right? And this alignment is the mechanism by which intention translates into action and action translates into results. So the key to effective visualization is really feeling, meaning you don't just see the outcome in your mind, you feel the energy of having achieved it in your body. And that felt sense creates a motivational pull towards the outcome that's far more powerful than just intellectual, logical goal setting alone. And incorporating this visualization plus energy practice into your daily routine, even for just 3 to 5 minutes, creates a sustained energetic direction that accumulates over time and then gradually pulls your behavior, your perception, and your circumstances into alignment with the outcome you're actually holding in your energy. And so you can also learn to transmit your energy intentionally in social situations, meaning you deliberately use your energetic state to influence the dynamics of a conversation or a meeting or a presentation or a sales call, etc. And this transmission capacity is what separates people who are merely energetic from people who are genuinely influential. This is what we used to also learn in sales when I was in sales, is that sales is to a big degree a transfer of energy, a transfer of state, right? The foundation of energetic transmission is presence, meaning you're fully in the moment with your attention and your energy focused on the person or the people you're with or the situation you're in. And that full presence is felt by everyone else. And it creates a quality of connection that distracted, scattered energy simply cannot produce. And I had big trouble with this because I would always be in my head, when in reality I was never present on these calls for a big amount of time. And so that is also a skill by itself, learning to be there, learning to be in the moment, not thinking about what you're going to say next, but actually listening, actually taking everything in. And so energetic transmission at scale is, I think, what leadership is to a big degree, where the leader's energy sets the tone for the entire team or organization as well, for an entire company. I think to a big degree, culture in a company is really a transfer of state and energy. And developing the capacity to hold a strong, clear, intentional energy in group settings is, I think, one of the most practically valuable skills that you can develop for any professional context. And the long-term path of energy mastery is learning to maintain a consistently high, clear, intentional energy state as your default, where the elevated state isn't something you have to manufacture every morning, but something that arises naturally from the practices, the identity work, and the self-awareness you've built. As the practices become more integrated into who you are rather than things you do, the energy management becomes automatic, meaning you don't have to think about controlling your energy anymore because your default state is already high, clear, and aligned, and that automatic high state is the compound result of everything we've talked about here. The awareness, the state control, the maintenance, the calibration, the direction. And the natural high energy state feels effortless in a way that manufactured energy will never do, where you're not really pumping yourself up or forcing positivity. You're simply operating from a baseline that's been elevated through consistent practice, which is what we really want. We don't want to be faking our high energy. We want to create it and basically raise that baseline so that we can always be high energy. And that effortless quality is both the sign of and the reward of genuine energy mastery. And so the natural state is sustainable in a way that forced high energy isn't, where you can maintain it indefinitely. Because it's not being generated through willpower or stimulation or trying to hype yourself up or downing 1,000 milligrams of caffeine or whatever. It's arising from the depth of your self-awareness, the clarity of your identity, and also the alignment of your daily practices with your values and goals. And the ultimate expression of energy mastery is living in a reality that you've shaped through your consistent energetic output, where the people around you, the opportunities available to you, the circumstances of your daily life, all of them reflect the energy you've been putting out for months and years, and that reflection is proof that the principle is real and that the work works. So at this level, you're no longer managing your energy to cope with reality. You're using your energy to create reality. And the distinction between those two things is the distinction between surviving and truly living, between reacting to what happens and authoring what happens. And so everything we've talked through here, the principle that energy precedes reality, the awareness and state management tool, the calibration and direction of your energetic output, all of it points to one thing: learning to control the energy you put into the world before it turns into the reality you live in. And that's the whole game. So with that said, let's cover the review. We talked about the energy precedes reality principle, the control layer, engineering your energetic output, the review, and finally, your action items for the day or the next few days. First, start tracking your energy state 3 times per day, morning, midday, and evening in your journal, noting the level, maybe 1 to 10, maybe 1 to 100, the quality, and also the primary influence on each reading. And then do this for 2 weeks to establish your personal energy patterns and identify your biggest drains and biggest boosters. Then design a 10-minute morning energy priming routine that includes physical movement, deliberate breathing, and visualization of your desired state for the day, and then commit to doing it every morning for 30 days before evaluating the results. And then finally, choose your 3 highest leverage activities this week, and before each one, spend 60 seconds deliberately setting the specific type and intensity of energy that the activity requires, and then journal afterwards about how the preset energy influenced the quality of your output. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was valuable. If you want to work with me one-on-one, as I said earlier, make sure to book a call from the link in the description. We work with entrepreneurs, professionals, high performers in different fields to basically help them master every aspect of their life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, with one complete system. If you want this training along with its respective document, then make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters helping you improve every aspect of your life, then make sure to join the free newsletter from the link in the description. Again, thank you for being here. I hope this was valuable, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is the identity stack and how to speak to yourself correctly. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, the word problem, the identity stack, the protocol, the review, and your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, if you want this document along with this training, as always, make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. If you want to work with me one-on-one, then make sure to book a call, again, from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on improving in every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the newsletter from the link in the description. Without further ado, let's get started and talk about the word problem. So the way you speak to yourself shapes your reality. I think we all know this at this point. It's a truth that goes back thousands of years and stretches across every major civilization and spiritual tradition on the planet. And it's also backed by modern neuroscience nowadays. But there's a problem that almost nobody addresses, and it's the reason most people try affirmations for a few weeks, for example, feel nothing, and then quit. The problem isn't the words. The problem is where the words are coming from. Now, the core idea is real, and it's worth understanding why so many traditions landed on the exact same conclusion independently of each other. Every major civilization figured this out on their own, and the fact that they all arrived at the same place through completely different paths is probably the strongest argument for taking it seriously. The Egyptians, for example, believed that speech carried creative power and built entire temple rituals around precise pronunciation of sacred words, where even one wrong syllable could supposedly throw cosmic order off balance. The Vedic tradition in India called humans Swayam Brahman, if I'm actually pronouncing this correctly, which roughly means that the self as creator, that the self is a creator, and their oldest texts describe the universe literally unfolding as a projection of conscious intention through spoken word. And then in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the entire creation story starts with God speaking things into existence. So you've got Egypt, India, and the Bible all pointing at the same thing from totally different angles. Now, when unrelated cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years all land on the same principle, that's pattern recognition across the whole of human experience, if you ask me. And it suggests that there's something real underneath the mythology. And what's wild is that the details match as well. Not just the broad idea, but the specific mechanics. They all emphasize precision, emotional alignment, and repetition as the three ingredients that make words actually work. Now, neuroscience has basically caught up to that with what these traditions were teaching, and the research on neuroplasticity gives us the mechanical explanation for why repeated self-talk actually rewires the brain over time. So when you think the same thought and say the same words over and over again, you're literally strengthening specific neural pathways, making those patterns easier and more automatic to access. And then there's the reticular activating system, which I've discussed a lot on this channel, the RAS, which is basically a filter in your brain that decides what information gets through to your conscious awareness based on what your subconscious considers important. So when your dominant self-talk is about lack and limitation, your RAS is actively filtering out evidence of opportunity and abundance. It's not that the opportunities aren't there, it's just that your brain isn't letting you see them. Now, neural pathways work like trails through snow, and the more you walk the same trail, the deeper it gets and the easier it is to follow, which means your habitual thoughts aren't just thoughts, they're physical grooves in your brain that take real effort and real time to reroute. This means your beliefs are literally editing your perception of reality in real time without you even knowing it. So you're walking around in a version of the world that's been curated by your own subconscious programming. Now, one finding that really drives this home is from performance coach Trevor Maid, who trained elite athletes and found that external speech, the words you actually say out loud, is roughly 10 times more powerful than internal thought alone in terms of its influence on your behavior and state. Now, the thing is, negative speech was found to be 40 to 70 times more impactful than positive speech. So one negative statement does more damage than dozens of positive ones can repair. Now, to really understand how words create results, you need to see the full chain of cause and effect. Words don't just float out into the universe and magically rearrange your life. They work through a very specific sequence that moves them from the invisible to the visible step by step. Now, the creative sequence goes like this. Energy enters your conscious mind where you form your thoughts, and those thoughts, that when held with attention, become ideas. Those ideas get impressed on your subconscious mind, which doesn't argue or reason. It just accepts whatever you feed it. The subconscious then produces emotions, because emotion is the language of the subconscious. Those emotions alter your physical vibration, meaning your literal energetic state shifts based on how you feel. That vibration then expresses itself through your body as action, basically the things you actually do and the way you carry yourself. And every action creates a reaction from your environment and the people in it. And if you add all of that up, you get your results, your reality. So it's thought to emotion, to speech, to action, to results. And words sit right in the middle of that chain as the bridge between your inner world and your outer world. Words occupy this unique position because they're the first point where something internal becomes external, where a thought gets pushed out into shared reality, where it can be witnessed, responded to, and built upon, which is why they carry so much more weight than thoughts alone. And the chain has a compounding effect as well. So a small shift at the thought level creates a bigger shift at the emotional level, which creates an even bigger shift at the action level. Changing what you say to yourself is literally a leverage point that multiplies through every stage below it. And when you really look at where words show up in your life, there are basically four major arenas at least, where this plays out. 4 places where your speech is actively shaping your reality, whether you're paying attention to it or not, and most people are completely unconscious in at least 2 or 3 of them. The first one, and the most obvious one, is your inner monologue, the constant stream of self-directed commentary that runs all day, every day. This is the most intimate and most dangerous arena because nobody else can hear it and nobody else can check it for you. So it just runs on autopilot unless you deliberately interrupt it. So you need to notice what you're saying to yourself about your self-concept, about what you can and can't do, about what's possible for you, about how the world works, and about what you think is going to happen. All of that inner chatter is programming your subconscious in real time. And the self-concept piece is the biggest one here because the things you say to yourself about who you are become the ceiling for everything else. You will never consistently outperform the opinion you hold of yourself in your private inner dialogue. Most people have never actually stopped to listen to their own inner monologue for even an hour. And if they did, they'd be horrified at how relentlessly negative and limiting it actually is, running on patterns that were most likely installed in childhood and never questioned. Now, the second arena is your affirmations and declarations, the statements that you say out loud or write down that affirm what you want to actually create. Now, the reason these matter is that the act of putting something into words, whether on paper or spoken aloud, takes it from 0 to 1. What does that mean? Well, an idea that only exists in your head is a 0. The minute it exists in some form in reality, even just as words on a page, it's in physical reality. It's now a 1, and a 1 can be multiplied. So declarations are basically seeds that you're planting in shared reality, and they signal to your subconscious that this is the direction you want to move in. This is where your energy should flow, and this is the intention you're committing to. Now, the third arena is your personal narratives, the stories you tell about yourself and your life that are really just clusters of beliefs strung together over a timeline. And these are honestly more powerful than single affirmations because they create identity. And identity is really what drives behavior consistently over long periods of time. So you need to pay close attention to the story you're actually telling about your past, your present, and your future. And are you the person whose business never works out, for example? Are you the person who can never get past a certain income? Are you the person who, for some reason or another, always attracts the wrong relationships? Are you the person that can never lose weight? Are you the person that never goes to the gym? Whatever story you're running, you're collecting evidence for it every single day. And that's the sneaky part, because the RAS we talked about earlier is always looking for proof that your current story is true. So the story feeds the filter, and the filter feeds the story, and the whole thing becomes this self-reinforcing flywheel unless you consciously rewrite the narrative. Now, changing your stories through conscious spoken word or written scripting will change your life more than any other single practice. When you change the story, you change the identity. And when you change the identity, everything downstream shifts with it. Now, the fourth arena is your conversations with other people, which most people totally overlook. Now, these matter enormously because once you put an idea out into shared reality through speech, other people can interact with it. And their response either amplifies it or diminishes it, right? So if you share your doubts and fears with someone who's equally stuck in negative, that negative seed gets multiplied. The idea becomes more real, more solid, more true than it was before you spoke it. Misery loves company. If, on the other hand, you share your vision with someone who's already succeeded in the way you want to succeed, or is on that path as well, or who just genuinely believes in what you're building, that positive seed gets multiplied. So you really have to be careful who you share your dreams with and who you process your fears with. Whatever you create with your word, you also have to protect and maintain. And that means being selective about who gets access to your ideas and your vulnerabilities. Now, with that covered, let's talk about the identity stack. So all of that is real and all of that works. But the thing that almost nobody actually addresses, and honestly I think is the single biggest reason people fail with this stuff, is the identity stack. Most approaches start at the level of words. Change your words, change your reality, speak to yourself correctly, and everything shifts. Great advice, true advice, but incomplete advice. Words don't exist in a vacuum. They sit on top of something, right? And if that something underneath them is broken or misaligned, then the words just bounce off. They stay surface level. And you end up doing affirmations for months with nothing to show for it except frustration. And it's not that the principle is necessarily wrong, you're just building from the wrong floor. So here's the framework I want to introduce, and I'm calling it the identity stack. And it basically shows you the 5 layers that words actually sit on top of. And it explains why you can't just skip straight to language and expect results. So the 5 layers from bottom to top go like this. First is physiology, your actual physical state, your breathing pattern, your posture, whether your nervous system is in fight or flight or rest and create mode. Second is state, your emotional frequency in the moment, whether you feel contracted and defensive or expanded and open. Third is identity, who you believe yourself to be at a felt level, not who you say you are, but who you actually feel like you are in your body. Fourth is language, the words you actually speak from that identity. And fifth is reality, the results your language and actions create in the world around you. Now, this order matters enormously because most people, as you can see, try to change the layer 4, language, while layers 1 through 3 are completely off. Now, that's like trying to build the 4th floor of a building when the foundation and the first 3 floors don't even exist yet. It's obviously going to be kind of impossible. So when your physiology supports your state and your state supports your identity and your identity supports your language, then the words you speak carry genuine weight and genuine frequency, and they actually penetrate the subconscious and actually shift the RAS and actually change your results, which is what everyone wants, but very few people experience because they keep starting too high up the stack. And here's maybe the most important thing about this. When the lower layers are aligned, you don't even have to try to find the new words. They basically come naturally, right? The right language flows out of you automatically when you're in the right state and operating from the right identity. Forced affirmations, in my opinion, are a symptom of misaligned lower layers. So let's talk about that bottom layer, because this is the piece that obviously gets skipped the most, almost every time, while it's arguably the most important one. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 primary modes. Sympathetic mode is your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. The stress activation state where basically your body is focused on survival. And parasympathetic mode is your rest and digest state where your body is more focused on repair, creation, and growth. When you're in sympathetic activation, when your breathing is shallow and your shoulders are tense, your cortisol is elevated, you just generally don't feel safe, secure, and relaxed. Well, your subconscious mind is literally in protection mode in that state. It's not open to receiving any new programming or positive self-talk. It's scanning for threats and trying to figure out how to deal with them. It doesn't care in that moment. Self-talk spoken from stress state hits a locked door. The subconscious hears the words, but it can't integrate them because the body is sending a completely contradictory signal. And you can think about it this way. You're standing there with your shallow breathing and a clenched jaw saying, I am abundant and I am at peace, and your entire nervous system is screaming the exact opposite. Well, your subconscious doesn't care. It doesn't listen to the words. It listens to the body. And the body is saying danger, scarcity, threat. So which signal do you think will win? This is basic nervous system science. The vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in your body and the primary regulator of your parasympathetic response, doesn't really respond to affirmations and self-talk. I'm not saying that these can't help, but generally speaking, in moments like this, it responds to other things. It responds to your breath ratio, to physical safety signals, to the actual physiological conditions of your body. You cannot talk your way past your own biology. You have to shift the biology first. And if you actually go back and look at the ancient traditions more carefully, they all knew this. Egyptian priests didn't just walk up and start chanting out of nowhere. They had extensive preparatory rituals. Vedic sages practiced hours of silent meditation before speaking their mantras. The Gnostics emphasized clearing the mind through contemplation before any declaration. Every tradition that taught the power of words also taught a preparatory practice to get the body and mind into the right state first. The words were never meant to be spoken cold. They were always the final step in a sequence, not the first, like most people do it. Now, the second layer, which sits right above physiology, is your state. This is where things start to get interesting because the state layer is really about coherence, about whether your heart and your brain and your body are all sending the same signal at the same time, or whether they're fragmented and pulling in different directions. So there's no coherence. There's actually research on this from Heart Math Institute. What they found is that when you generate a genuine feeling of gratitude or appreciation or love, your heart rhythm pattern becomes smooth and ordered. And that coherent heart signal actually synchronizes your brain waves and your nervous system into a unified state. They call it heart-brain coherence. And in that state, your subconscious is maximally open, maximally receptive, and maximally ready to integrate new beliefs and new identity level programming. So the emotional state isn't just a nice to have, it's the actual gateway through which words can enter the subconscious and take root. And the more important distinction here is we're not talking about thinking grateful thoughts. We're talking about generating the actual felt sensation of gratitude in your body. So the thought alone doesn't shift the nervous system. The feeling does. Your body has to actually be in the experience of the emotion, not just conceptualizing it. So when you hear people say affirmations or self-talk doesn't work for them, what's usually happening is that they're speaking words from a state of stress or emotional flatness, and the subconscious is either locked down in protection mode or simply not engaged enough to care or absorb anything, and the words just float across the surface without ever sinking in. And then the third layer, sitting above state, is identity. This is the layer that basically determines the content of your speech. You speak from who you believe you are. If deep down you believe that you're someone who struggles with money, then no amount of saying I am wealthy will override that felt sense of identity. The words and the identity have to match, and that's where it gets a bit circular in a good way. When your physiology is calm and your state is coherent, accessing a new identity becomes possible in a way that isn't when you're stressed. You can actually feel into the version of yourself you want to become, not just imagine it intellectually, but actually feel it in your body as real and present and true. And from that felt identity, the right words emerge on their own. Now, the reason most affirmations fail is because there's a gap between the words being spoken and the identity being felt. And your subconscious can detect that gap instantly. So it just discards the words as noise because they don't match the deeper signal. But when identity and words are congruent, when you actually feel like the person who would naturally say those things, the words carry a completely different weight and a completely different frequency. And that's when the RAS really starts updating its filters, and that's when reality starts rearranging itself around you. Now, with that said, let's cover the protocol and how to apply all of this practically. So now that you understand why most people fail with self-talk practices and where words actually fit in the full stack, let's get into the actual protocol to use this to your advantage. Now, if you skipped to this part, make sure to go back to the beginning and actually watch the video. Otherwise, none of this will make sense. So 5 steps that you run through before any affirmation, any self-image script, or reading, or any journaling, or any declaration. It takes about 5 minutes total once you get the actual hang of it, and it completely changes the quality and the impact of every word that actually follows. So the first step is really resetting your nervous system, and this takes about 60 seconds. The technique is stupidly simple, but it's incredibly effective. So you inhale as deep as you can from your nose, and then when you can't inhale anymore, or you feel like you can't inhale anymore, you just slip in an extra quick inhale. Now, then you exhale for as long as you can. Typically, you should try to do it for longer than your inhale. Now, if you need a quick tip with that, how to make it longer, then just make the F sound as you exhale. And you repeat that for about 3 to 5 rounds. That's it. Now, the reason this works is that the exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve. Your inhale activates sympathetic, your exhale activates parasympathetic. So when the exhale is longer than the inhale, you're sending a direct signal to your brainstem that says you're safe. Stand down from threat detection and open up for something new. Don't overcomplicate this. At the end of the day, it's just breathing with a longer exhale. You don't need an app. You don't need a special environment. You can do this sitting at your desk, in your car, laying in bed, whatever you prefer. The point is to just shift your nervous system from reactive to receptive before you put any words into it. And what's happening on a mechanical level is that you're changing the information your body is sending to your brain. The body talks to the brain just as much as the brain talks to the body. And when the body is sending a safety signal through calm, regulated breathing, the brain responds by opening up pathways that are closed during stress. And you'll actually feel the shift happen, usually by the third or fourth breath, where something in your chest or in your shoulders or just a general feeling of relaxation comes. It's just sort of let's go, right? Something in your chest or shoulders just sort of let's go. And that's your nervous system literally switching modes from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from protection to reception. So why this matters so much is because your vagal tone, which is basically a measure of how well your vagus nerve functions, is directly linked to emotional regulation, social connection, and cognitive flexibility. People with higher vagal tone recover from stress faster, have better emotional range, and are more open to new information and new beliefs. And vagal tone improves with practice. So the more you do this breathing reset consistently, the easier and faster the shift will become over time, and the more naturally receptive your baseline state becomes. This is one of those things where the daily practice will actually compound over weeks and months. So at first, the shift might take all 5 rounds of breathing, but eventually you can drop into a receptive state in 1 or 2 breaths because you've trained the pathway so thoroughly. Now, the second step is entering a coherent state, and this takes about 2 to 3 minutes. It builds directly on the nervous system reset you just did, and what you do is you place your hand on the center of your chest and you start breathing as if the breath is flowing in and out through your heart area. Now, this isn't a visualization exercise, it's more so a focusing technique. You're directing your attention to the heart center while you breathe, and then while you're doing this, you generate a genuine feeling. Not a thought about a feeling, but an actual felt experience of gratitude or love or appreciation. And you can think of something specific. It could be a person you love, a moment that actually moved you, a gift that you truly feel grateful for, anything. And let that feeling spread through your chest and your whole body while you continue the heart-focused breathing. And I want to stress this, it has to be real, right? You can't just fake this part, because if you're just going through the motions and thinking about gratitude without actually feeling it, nothing happens. The nervous system and the heart respond to authentic emotion, not to the concept of emotion. So find something that actually touches you, even if it's small, even if it's as simple as the fact that you actually woke up this morning, or that someone in your life actually cares about you. It could be a message from a loved one even. The more specific and personal the thing you're feeling grateful for, the easier it is to actually generate a real emotion around it. It makes sense, right? Don't try to feel grateful for life in general. Feel grateful for one particular thing that actually lights something up inside you. And you'll know it's working when you feel actual warmth or expansion in your chest area. That's the physical signature of heart coherence. And once you feel that, you know that your subconscious gateway is open and ready to receive whatever you put into it next. And this is the part where the ancient traditions were way ahead of us, honestly. All those preparatory rituals, the dawn meditations, the silence practices, the contemplative breathing before chanting, they were all doing exactly this without having the scientific vocabulary for it. They were shifting their physiology and they were entering coherence before speaking their sacred words. The words were always meant to come after the state shift, not before it. We just lost that sequencing somewhere along the way, and we ended up with people doing cold affirmations into a stressed out nervous system while basically staring at themselves in the mirror and then wondering why nothing changes. So what we're really doing here isn't inventing something new. We're recovering a lost protocol that every wisdom tradition used to know and practice, and we're updating it with more modern language and modern understanding of the nervous system. Now, the third step is speaking your truth, and this is where the self-talk piece finally comes in, the language, except now you're doing it from a completely different foundation. Your nervous system is in parasympathetic mode. Your heart and brain are in coherence, and your subconscious gateway is wide open. From this place, you want to speak one single declaration, not 10, not 20, just one spoken slowly with full presence and full feeling in every syllable. And the reason for just one declaration is something that kept showing up across everything I studied on the topic. One conscious statement spoken with absolute conviction and full body feeling carries more creative power than 1,000 scattered affirmations rushed through without presence. And you can think about it if you're more religious. In Genesis, creation was spoken out into existence one command at a time. Let there be light, one thing, fully felt, fully intended, and then released. And the way you do this is you let each word land before you move on to the next one. Feel the I before you say the am. Feel the am before you actually say whatever comes next, right? Let each word settle into your body like it's the first time you've ever said it. It's not supposed to be like you're speed reading a script, right? This is speaking something into existence. And the declaration itself needs to come from identity, not from desire. I am, not I want. I am, not I hope. Speak as the person you're becoming. From the felt sense of already being that person, which is much easier to access when your body and state are already aligned through the first two steps. And then after you speak it, you let it go completely. No checking, no repeating nervously, no wondering if it worked. You planted the seed in prepared soil. You don't dig up a seed to check if it's growing, right? You trust the process and you move on with your day. Like we talked about earlier with the divided mind problem, the worst thing you can do is to declare something powerfully and then spend the rest of the day contradicting it with anxious inner monologue. Speak it once, feel it fully, and then release it. And this is honestly where faith comes in, real faith, not blind belief, but the kind of trust that comes from understanding how the mechanics actually work. When you understand how the mechanics work, you just have faith, you have belief, because you just know it's bound to happen. Once you know that your nervous system is open, your subconscious is receptive, and your declaration was spoken from genuine felt identity, you can trust that the programming has been received and the process is underway. And then you do this every single day. Same protocol, maybe same declaration, maybe a different one, depending on where you're focusing, but the sequence stays the same. Reset, coherence, declare, protect, confirm every single day. And over time, the compound effect of doing this daily from an aligned state is really staggering compared to years of cold affirmations, looking at yourself stressed out in the mirror. So I mentioned the fourth step here, which is protect. Now, the fourth step is protecting your state throughout the rest of the day. The morning protocol is only as powerful as your ability to maintain some degree of that alignment as you move through your daily life. And the world is going to test you. Stress is going to show up, and negative conversations are going to happen. And every time you get pulled into reactive mode, your nervous system will shift back into sympathetic. Your RAS will go back to scanning for threats, and your old programming will try to reassert itself. So what you do is micro resets throughout the day. Anytime you feel stress activating, anytime you catch yourself slipping into negative self-talk or reactive emotion, you pause and do the 2 to 3 extended exhale breaths. Just enough to pull your nervous system back towards parasympathetic. You don't need to do the full 5-minute protocol every time. You just need to interrupt the stress response before it takes over and starts writing your inner dialogue for you. Now, this is basically the same as the pattern interruption we talked about earlier, where you wake up from unconscious thinking and catch yourself before you walk down the old neural pathway. Except now you're adding a physiological component to it, which makes the interruption way more effective because you're not just trying to outthink your stress. You're actually changing the signal your body is sending to your brain. And every time you do a micro reset and choose a better thought from a calmer state, that's a vote towards the new identity. Every time you let the stress run and let the old self-talk take over, that's a vote towards the old one, right? And like we covered earlier, whichever side gets more votes by the end of the day is what you're reinforcing. So the protection step is really about winning the daily vote count. And this also applies to your conversations with other people, which are the fourth battleground we talked about in the first section. Be very intentional about who you share your vision with and who you process your doubts with. A conversation with the wrong person in a stressed state can undo your entire morning protocol in about 5 minutes flat. Share your seeds with people who've already grown what you're planting, or people who genuinely believe in what you're building or are on the same path as you. And if you feel yourself getting pulled into a negative conversation you can't avoid, then use the micro reset breathing to hold your state and be very conscious of the words you choose to put into that space. And honestly, part of protecting your state is really also protecting your inputs, meaning what you consume through media, news, social media, and even casual entertainment. All of that is programming going into your subconscious. And if you spend your morning doing the protocol and then spend 3 hours, 5 hours scrolling through fear-based content on Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts or whatever, you've basically canceled out the whole thing. And the fifth step is looking for confirmations. And this is the step that I think most people skip entirely because they don't even know it exists. And is the step that turns the protocol from a morning practice into an all-day feedback loop. So once you've done the work, once you've reset your nervous system, you've entered coherence, you've spoken your declaration, you've released it, and started protecting your state, your job for the rest of the day is to just actively look for evidence that your new identity is already showing up in your reality. And it starts pretty small, really small. It can be really anything. These things are happening all the time, right? But if you're not looking for them, your RAS will filter them out. Remember, the RAS only lets through what it considers relevant to your dominant programming, to your dominant thoughts. So when you consciously decide to look for confirmations, you're literally telling your RAS to update its filters in real time. So every confirmation you notice becomes fuel for the next day's protocol. So when you sit down tomorrow morning and do your breathing reset and enter coherence, the felt state of your new identity is stronger because you collected real evidence for it yesterday. And the stronger that felt identity, the more powerful your declaration, if you remember. And the more confirmations you notice, and the whole thing becomes a self-reinforcing upward spiral. This is literally the opposite of what most people are running. Most people are unconsciously collecting evidence for their limitations, which strengthens, guess what, their old identity, which produces, guess what, more limiting self-talk, which filters for more evidence of limitation. Same loop, opposite direction. You're essentially training your RAS to scan for proof that your new identity is real, instead of letting it default to scanning for proof that your old identity is still in charge. And the more you do this, the more natural it will become, until eventually you don't even have to remind yourself of it because you're noticing confirmations automatically throughout the day, which means that your RAS has been reprogrammed. So with that said, let's go over the review. We talked about the overview, the word problem, the identity stack, the protocol, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. First, run the full 5-step protocol every single morning for the next 7 days before any journaling, scripting, or affirmation practice, and notice how different the words feel when they're coming from a regulated nervous system and a coherent state. Then spend 1 full day tracking your inner monologue and your conversations with others, paying attention not just to the words themselves, but to the physical state you're in when you're saying them. And notice how much of your self-talk actually happens from a stressed, shallow breathing, contracted place versus a calm, grounded, open one. Then finally, identify the 3 biggest state disruptors in your daily life, whether that's certain people, certain media, certain environments, or certain thoughts or beliefs, and create a specific plan for either eliminating them or using micro resets to hold your state when you can't avoid them. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did and you want this training along with this document, make sure to join the free community from the link in the description. If you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call, again, from the link in the description. And if you want weekly newsletters on improving in every aspect of your life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, then make sure to join the newsletter, again, from the link in the description. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.